Hello, hello. Welcome again to CAE's CREATE12 challenge, where each lesson will be covering an element or principle of art. This week, we'll be covering texture, or the perceived surface quality of a work of art, whether that be smooth, rough, bumpy, etc. Let's get started, shall we? Now that we have our materials, let's get into our artist for this lesson, Delita Martin. Now, Martin is a contemporary artist who has her roots in Arkansas. She is a master printmaker and draftsman, and she is known for combining different forms of printmaking such as intaglio, screen printing, gelatin printmaking, and others with charcoal drawings. We're going to take a page from Delita Martin's book today in this lesson, where we incorporate a form of printmaking with drawing. Now, our first step is to get out some of our materials. Namely, we have to decide on a color palette for our texture rubbing project. Now here I have my crowns, and it's very important that I use crowns for this project. I want to use mainly light colors, as that's going to be super important in our rubbing today. So I'm only going to pick 2 or 3 colors. I think I want to go with kind of more of a warm palette. Here we go. So I have a peach color, this nice tan color. I have this melon color and this yellow green. Next, I'm going to gather some of my textural objects. I have this piece of coaster. It's nice and wooden. It's got this grid engraving on it. Now, whenever you are choosing your textures, keep in mind that if you can feel the texture on the object, you will most likely be able to transfer that texture to your paper. I also have this really cool map that I found on one of my sketchbooks. It's got kind of like a embossing on it. I have kind of a burlap texture on this sketchbook, which has kind of like a very hard linen feel. And I've also gathered some leaves for this project. This one is from a blackberry bush, and this one is from a squash plant. Now you can find textures all around your house. For instance, this is actually a candle. It's one of my favorite candles that I own. I do not use it because I just love the shape of it. But as you can see, it has like a fish scale texture, and even its fins and its mouth they have texture on it. So I can even use this as part of my texture rubbing project. You can use engravings that you find on cups, even things that you find on your wall, the texture on your wall, you can use. So in order to do a texture rubbing, you will need a couple sheets of paper just in case the first texture rubbing doesn't come out right. And then you'll need some crowns. Now for your crowns, you want to go ahead and take off some of the paper around the sides because we're going to be using this long edge to rub with. And you want to do that for all your colors. Now that I've prepped my materials, I'm going to start on my first texture rubbing, and I'm going to use this blackberry leaf that's pretty large. In order to do this texture rubbing, I'm going to put my texture down on a hard surface, such as my desk here. I'm going to try to flatten it out, make sure none of the edges are curling. I'm going to gently lay my paper over the textured object and kind of see generally where I would like it on the piece of paper. Maybe I want it in the corner. And there's not an entire way where I can see where I want it unless I hold it up to the light, right? But this part's kind of a guessing game. Next, I'm going to very gently rub the side of my crown over where I think my texture is. Everything that raises up is going to transfer to the paper, and you can see that with the veins of the leaf and the edges as well. So here we have a completed leaf texture rubbing, right? Now I want to do quite a couple of these leaves, and I might change my colors. So we have finished the first part of our texture rubbing here. And let me give you an example of what the second part looks like. So here is a previous texture rubbing that I've done. And as you can see, here is actually the coaster with that grid pattern on it. It showed up a little interesting, but it's still there. And I used a different color palette. I used some darker browns and this a kind of more mauve color. And over the top of it, I did a branch of a blackberry bush. And this is because I used blackberry leaves in my texture rubbings, and I wanted something that was very cohesive. So that's why I did the blackberries. And just like our artist, Alita Martin, there's a stark contrast between the pattern in the background and the actual subject here, which is entirely black. And that's what we want to do in this next part. We want to have something that really comes forward from the background and is very prominent. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to take a note from my squash leaf here, and I might draw some squashes on here, depending on what you took your textures from, whether or not that was a certain plant, like from a flower, or a strawberry plant, or even from the walls of your house. You can draw a part of your house if you did texture rubbings on some of your walls. You can draw something that kind of correlates with the texture that you took from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do some sketches on this to establish that foreground, and I will see you after the speed through. So we have our finished texture rubbings here, and although they do not have physical texture, you know, when I rub my fingers over them, they're flat. They do have visual texture. So they don't have physical texture, they have visual texture. And we got that from the textured objects themselves with this texture rubbing technique. Now, You don't have to draw plants alongside your texture rubbings. You can take a note from Delita Martin, our artist, for this lesson. You can actually draw a self-portrait. It is completely up to you. I do look forward to seeing your rendition of this project. I always do enjoy them, so please share them with us whenever you have the chance. And I thank you again for joining me on this project, and I'll see you in the next one.